You want to upgrade your life. Start walking away from anything that keeps you average. Not with anger, not with drama, just with clarity. The moment you stop negotiating with what drains you, your life will upgrade so fast it'll feel like you swapped identities. Most people aren't stuck. They're just loyal to the wrong things. Walking away isn't about abandoning something. It's about choosing the version of you that you want to invest in. And most people never realize how much their life is suffocating under commitments they didn't consciously choose. Every time you stay in a situation that drains you, you're paying a tax on your potential, a tax you never agreed to but keep paying because it feels familiar. Walking away is the moment you reclaim your time, your bandwidth, and your identity from routines that stopped serving you long ago. It's the mental audit where you look at everything in your life and ask, is this building me or breaking me? And if the answer isn't an obvious yes, then the return on keeping it is already negative. It's not a dramatic exit, it's a strategic reallocation of effort. It's understanding that everything you hold on to has an opportunity cost, and some of those costs are so high they silently bankrupt your confidence. The people who grow fast are the people who cut fast, because they know staying stuck steals years, while walking away only steals minutes. When you finally choose yourself over the expectations others placed on you, you discover your capacity was never the issue. Your environment was. And the day you walk away is the day everything in your life gets permission to upgrade. Most people think walking away is an act of weakness, but it's actually the first indicator that you're starting to operate from a place of self-respect instead of insecurity. The truth is, you only cling tightly to things you're afraid to lose when you don't believe you can rebuild or replace them. The moment you improve your skill set, your discipline, and your self-worth, you stop negotiating with mediocrity. You start seeing clearly that the things you once tolerated were never aligned with who you're capable of becoming. Walking away is not emotional, it's mathematical. You weigh the costs, you measure the ROI, and you cut what doesn't perform. When you start treating your energy like a finite resource, you stop wasting it on people who drain it. When you shift from, I hope this changes, to I choose what I allow, your entire life structure reorganizes itself around higher standards. You no longer wait for permission to leave, you decide, and that decision signals to your brain that you're done operating at a discount version of yourself. It's the first step toward rebuilding a life that reflects your actual value instead of the value others assign to you. There's a misconception that endurance is noble, that sticking things out proves strength. But what actually takes strength is the courage to step away when something is no longer aligned with your growth. Anyone can stay. Staying requires no imagination, no courage, and no responsibility for what comes next. Walking away demands clarity about where you're heading and enough inner stability to accept that transitions are uncomfortable. And that's why so few people do it. They choose familiar suffering over unfamiliar freedom. But every time you walk away from something that diminishes you, you teach yourself that you're capable of more. You build a track record of self-trust, which becomes the foundation for every future transformation. You become the type of person who doesn't cling out of fear, but chooses out of intention. You learn very quickly that the space created by walking away gets filled with higher quality people, opportunities, and environments. It's not magic, it's physics. Remove what blocks you, and what's meant for you can finally reach you. And the more you practice it, the faster you grow, because you are no longer battling the friction of misalignment every single day. When you finally walk away from the wrong commitments, something profound happens. Your life recalibrates around your potential instead of your past. You start noticing how much mental clarity returns when you stop forcing yourself into spaces that shrink you. You realize how much energy you actually have when it isn't being drained by constant conflict, over-explaining, or trying to make something work that clearly isn't meant to. You see how quickly your confidence rebuilds when you're no longer surrounded by people who undervalue you. You begin to operate with sharper focus because your time is no longer fragmented by obligations that don't contribute to your goals. The upgrades show up quietly at first. Better ideas, better discipline, better habits. Then they show up loudly. Better relationships, better opportunities, better self-image. Walking away is the catalyst that accelerates everything else because it removes the dead weight holding you back. And once you feel the momentum of that upgrade, you stop questioning whether you made the right decision. You understand finally and fully that walking away wasn't the loss, it was the unlock. Your environment is shaping you even when you think you're the one in control, because the people, energy, and expectations around you are silently instructing you on how big or small you're allowed to be. If you surround yourself with people who normalize complaining, you will complain. If you surround yourself with people who normalize growth, you will grow without even realizing it. The environment becomes the default operating system you run your life on, and most people never question the system. They just follow it. When you're in a room where ambition is rare, you start to feel guilty for wanting more, and you shrink your goals to match the comfort of the group. When you're in a room where ambition is expected, you stop justifying your goals and start executing them. The environment you choose either compresses your potential or expands it, and you can measure it by how you feel after you leave that space. If you walk away drained, confused, or doubting yourself, that environment is extracting value from you rather than amplifying it. If you walk away energized, grounded, and committed, the environment is compounding your growth. Your environment is a silent KPI, telling you exactly whether your life is trending upward or plateauing, and you can't outperform an environment that contradicts your goals. Most people underestimate how contagious the habits of their environment truly are, because they assume their willpower is stronger than the influences around them. But willpower is a finite resource, and environment is a 24/7 force that never takes a day off. If you consistently place yourself in situations where excuses, shortcuts, and low standards are normal, you will absorb those patterns through sheer exposure. If you put yourself around people who hold themselves accountable, take ownership, and push their limits, you will elevate simply by proximity. Your brain mirrors the behaviors it sees most often, and eventually those behaviors become your new baseline. This is why you can work incredibly hard and still feel like you're not progressing. Your environment is canceling out your effort. It's like sprinting on a treadmill. You're moving, you're sweating, you're trying, but you're not advancing because the ground beneath you isn't moving forward. Changing your environment is what shifts the ground, turning your effort into actual progress. And once you experience that shift, you realize you were never broken. You were just in a place that didn't match your trajectory. When you start upgrading your environment, something interesting happens. The friction you used to feel every day begins to disappear. You're no longer fighting to stay motivated because motivation becomes the culture of the room you're in. You no longer have to defend your goals because the people around you share the same hunger for growth. You don't waste energy justifying your boundaries because high-standard environments demand them, not question them. Upgraded environments force you to step up, not shrink down, because mediocrity stands out as the exception, not the norm. They make your excuses feel uncomfortable and your potential feel obvious. You stop debating whether you're capable and start acting like someone who already is. Your conversations change from gossip to strategy, from complaining to problem solving, from fear to execution. And even if you enter that environment as the least experienced person in the room, you will grow faster than you ever could in an environment where you are the most capable. Growth environments don't just inspire you. They pressure you into rising, and that pressure is the most productive form of accountability you will ever experience. The moment you walk away from environments that limit you, your entire life begins to upgrade because you finally give yourself the conditions required for exponential growth. You start noticing that better decisions feel natural when you're surrounded by people who expect excellence. You realize that discipline is easier when those around you live it, not just talk about it. You begin to see that confidence grows faster in spaces where people believe in themselves and push each other upward. Your identity rewrites itself because you're constantly exposed to examples of what's possible instead of reminders of what's safe. You learn that growth is not about forcing yourself to rise. It's about placing yourself where rising is the only direction available. And as your environment upgrades, so does your mindset, your habits, your relationships, your opportunities, and the standards you hold yourself to. The life you want is not built through willpower alone. It's built through the environments you choose to stand in. And the moment you choose an environment that supports your evolution becomes inevitable. Your standards are the invisible blueprint of your future because everything you allow, every behavior you tolerate, every boundary you avoid setting, every inconsistency you excuse, becomes the level your life settles at. The truth is, people don't rise to ambition. They rise to standards and they fall to the absence of them. When you accept disrespect or chaos or low effort, you're not just putting up with it. You're training others to believe that this is all you require. And the longer you tolerate something misaligned, the harder it becomes to recognize how deeply it's shaping your identity. You start to normalize what should have been non-negotiable, and you shrink yourself to maintain situations that no longer reflect your worth. Raising your standards isn't about demanding perfection from others. It's about demanding alignment with the person you're becoming. When you walk away from what doesn't meet your standards, you send a signal to your brain that you deserve better, and that signal builds self-respect. Your future is predicted more by what you refuse to tolerate than by what you hope to achieve. The reason most people struggle to raise their standards is because standards require consistency, and consistency forces you to confront the habits that made your current life possible. It's easier to blame circumstances than it is to upgrade your expectations of yourself. But every standard begins internally, long before it's reflected in your relationships, your work, or your environment. If your standard is honesty, you must first stop lying to yourself about what you need. If your standard is discipline, you must stop negotiating with the old version of you. And if your standard is respect, you must stop entertaining people who treat you like an option. High standards make your life simpler, not stricter, because they eliminate the noise that wastes your time and drains your energy. They filter out the people who are incompatible with your growth and attract those who match your values. When you commit to living at a higher standard, you stop chasing validation and start choosing alignment. And that shift becomes the foundation of every upgrade that follows. Sometimes raising your standards requires you to walk away from people you care about, routines you've grown comfortable with, and versions of yourself you've outgrown. This is the part that feels uncomfortable, but it's also the part that transforms you. You can't evolve while keeping everything in your life the same. Something has to be released to make space for something better. Walking away isn't punishment, it's clarity. It's acknowledging that you cannot build a bigger life with people who reinforce your smaller one. And oftentimes, the first thing you must walk away from is the fear that you will end up alone or misunderstood. But the moment you choose standards over comfort, everything in your life reorganizes itself around that choice. The wrong people fall away because they can't survive in an environment of growth. The right people show up because they are drawn to your confidence and clarity. Raising your standards forces you to level up internally, externally, and relationally. And it becomes impossible to go back to the version of you who once tolerated less. When you learn to protect your standards without apologizing, life starts to feel more aligned, more energizing, and more purposeful. You stop over-explaining yourself because your standards speak for you. You stop accepting breadcrumbs because you finally understand your own value. And you stop betraying yourself to make others comfortable because you know that self-abandonment is the quickest route to a mediocre life. Your standards become your compass, guiding you toward the relationships, opportunities, and environments that match who you're becoming rather than who you were. They create a foundation of self-trust because every time you uphold them, even when it's difficult, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on yourself. And as that self-trust grows, so does your capacity to pursue bigger goals, make bolder decisions, and walk away from anything that compromises your growth. Your standards are not rules. They are declarations of the life you intend to build, And every upgrade you experience starts with the moment you decide that anything misaligned is no longer an option. Reinvention always begins with a quiet truth you can't ignore anymore. You've outgrown the version of yourself you've been carrying, and to step into the next level, you have to release the identity that once kept you safe. Most people cling to who they used to be because it's familiar, predictable, and easy to explain to others, but comfort is the enemy of transformation. You can't evolve while dragging outdated beliefs, old habits, and expired expectations behind you. Reinvention requires subtraction first, letting go of the roles you performed for approval, the patterns you repeated for validation, and the masks you wore to fit small spaces. It asks you to walk away from the stories that once defined you, so you can write a new one without the weight of who you used to be. And yes, there's grief in outgrowing an identity, because even the wrong version of you once felt like home. But staying attached to an old identity is like keeping the training wheels on a bike you're fully capable of riding, comforting but limiting. The moment you give yourself permission to walk away from that outdated self, you create space for a version of you that is stronger, clearer, and fully aligned with the life you actually want. Reinvention begins the second you stop negotiating with who you no longer are. Walking away from old identities also means walking away from the behaviors that kept you stuck, even if those behaviors once helped you survive. You can't keep the habits of the old you and expect the results of the upgraded you, because growth requires a fundamental shift in how you think, act, and respond. Maybe the old you avoided conflict, played small, procrastinated, or relied on external validation to feel worthy. Maybe you tolerated disrespect, ignored your intuition, or entertained people who drained you because being needed felt safer than being powerful. But when you decide to reinvent yourself, every one of those patterns gets put under a microscope. You realize that the behavior you call normal is actually the behavior holding you back. Reinvention demands honesty so sharp it cuts through every excuse you've ever made for staying the same. It pushes you to take responsibility for your choices, your boundaries, your energy, and your outcomes. And that responsibility is both liberating and terrifying, because once you see the old pattern clearly, you can never unsee it. You're forced to choose. Stay loyal to the comfort of your old identity, or commit to the discipline of becoming someone new. Reinvention rewards the brave, not the comfortable. The hardest part of reinvention is not changing. It's enduring the space between the old you and the new you, the in-between phase where you feel like you've outgrown your past, but haven't yet fully stepped into your future. This is the phase that scares most people back into their old identity, because reinvention doesn't give you instant evidence that you're on the right path. You lose people who were attached to the outdated version of you. You lose routines that once kept you grounded. You lose the certainty that comes from familiarity. But what you gain, clarity, autonomy, strength, self-respect, is worth more than anything you leave behind. The in-between phase is where you build resilience, because you learn to stand on your own inner knowing rather than external reassurance. It's where you learn to trust your decisions even when they don't yet make sense to anyone else. It's where the upgraded version of you begins to emerge quietly, through discipline, consistency, and the courage to keep going before you see results. If you can survive the in-between, you'll experience a transformation that feels like a quantum leap. Not because it happened overnight, but because the world finally catches up to the identity you've been building in silence. Reinvention is earned in the gap, not the outcome. And eventually, there comes a moment where everything clicks. The new habits feel natural, the new boundaries feel obvious, and the new version of you feels undeniable. The person you once were becomes a distant echo, not because you're running from them, but because you've outgrown every limitation they lived under. You look back with gratitude, not regret, because every version of you played a role in getting you here. Reinvention isn't about abandoning your past, It's about refusing to be confined by it. When you walk away from who you used to be, you're not starting over. You're upgrading your operating system. You're choosing intentionality over autopilot, alignment over approval, identity over insecurity. And that choice becomes the turning point for every breakthrough that follows. Because the truth is simple. The life you want is waiting for the person you're becoming, not the person you've been. And when you finally step into that new identity with conviction, you'll realize the most powerful decision you ever made was walking away from the old you, so you could rise into the person you were meant to become.